Welcome, everyone, to today's Explainer. We are diving into a deeply fascinating and honestly kind of hidden corner of the hard sciences. We tend to think of fields like mathematics and physics as purely objective realms, right? We imagine them as these perfect meritocracies where the best, most truthful ideas just naturally rise to the top. But the sociology behind these fields tells a much, much more complex story. Today, we're going to look at the actual mechanics of institutional power. Specifically, we're looking at how scientific establishments handle radically disruptive new ideas. Spoiler alert, it's not always with rigorous debate. More often than not, it's with silence.
Okay, let's dive into this. I really want you to imagine a scenario for a second. What if a truly groundbreaking, literally world-changing idea was presented to the scientific community and it wasn't met with rigorous debate or even angry, fiery opposition? What if, instead, it was met with absolutely nothing, just a complete void? What if only one person holding a great idea was simply ignored? Pondering this question really opens the door to understanding the high-stakes sociology of academia. Because in these environments, ignoring someone isn't just rude, it's a calculated, highly effective mechanism of control.
Section 1. The Architecture of Silence.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept of strategic ignoring is that in the high-stakes corridors of math and physics, institutional stability isn't just some natural byproduct of everyone magically agreeing. No way. It is a rigorously maintained hegemonic equilibrium. And ignoring isn't a passive thing. It's a highly active, incredibly powerful defense mechanism. Institutions exert their power through the deliberate denial of recognition. Why? Well, engaging in rigorous debate drains a ton of resources. Dismissal, on the other hand, that preserves the established intellectual capital of the ruling elite, and it neutralizes any anomalies right out of the gate.
Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of the Threat. Let's look at how new ideas actually destabilize the status quo.
And this breakdown brilliantly illustrates exactly why there's a need for such a heavy defensive posture. In the hard sciences, established frameworks are so much more than just teaching tools. Because math and physics are cumulative, a new idea is almost never a simple addition. It's a subversive reevaluation. It's like a giant puzzle where a new piece doesn't just fit in, it forces you to flip the whole table. This destabilization hits three main axes. First, established knowledge hierarchies. A radical paradigm frequently renders decades of institutional research, curated data sets, and a senior practitioner's entire life work completely obsolete. Second, professional authority. Disruptive concepts directly challenge the monopoly of the experts. If the new framework wins, the current elite lose their specialized expertise. And third, systemic predictability. Institutions absolutely thrive on predictable incremental progress. Disruptive ideas introduce massive epistemic noise, and that throws the orderly administration of grants, tenure, and departmental prestige into absolute chaos.
To put that into perspective, prestige in these fields is incredibly scarce. Scientific proofs and fundamental laws have a very winner-takes-all nature to them. Because it's such a high-stakes environment, the governance of truth is intrinsically, permanently linked to the control of resources. So, if you challenge the accepted paradigm, you aren't just disagreeing with a colleague on a whiteboard. You are launching a fundamental assault on resource distribution and the entire established order.
Section 3. The Tactics of Dismissal. Let's explore how ignoring is used as a calculated defense.
So, how exactly do institutions deploy silence as a tactical weapon? You might naturally think that active opposition, things like peer review rejection or harsh public critique, would be the primary defense. But strategic ignoring is far more potent. Think about resource expenditure. Active opposition is super high because it demands a rigorous rebuttal. Strategic ignoring? Very low. It conserves energy. Now look at the efficacy of suppression. Active opposition is actually kind of low because it grants the idea a platform. It gives it the oxygen of engagement and risks the Streisand effect, validating it as something worth talking about. Strategic ignoring is incredibly high. It conservatively starves the idea and ensures total marginalization. Finally, long-term stability. Fighting an idea makes things volatile. By acknowledging that there's a rift in consensus, ignoring it entirely ensures absolute stability. It completely maintains the illusion of an undisputed paradigm.
This tactical silence operates in a very cold, highly logical two-phase mechanism. Step 1 is preemptive dismissal. That's the first line of defense. By withholding initial acknowledgement, gatekeepers ensure a new idea never enters the citation economy. And, well, if it's never cited or recognized, it technically doesn't exist in the formal scientific record. But what if it actually survives? That brings us to Step 2, terminal neglect. The last defense. This is the deliberate choice to starve an idea that has somehow gained a fringe following. By flat-out refusing to integrate it into the broader discourse, the system renders it culturally invisible, keeping it permanently locked away as a peripheral anomaly.
But occasionally, an idea pushes through so hard that it absolutely has to be addressed. When a disruptive idea cannot be attacked on its actual scientific merits, gatekeepers will just pivot. They'll attack the messenger. They'll actively try to discredit the bringer of the bad news. The tactic shifts to claiming the person putting the idea forward is incompetent or unknown or simply not our people. It's an incredibly effective way to maintain that wall of silence around the actual science itself.
And here is another wildly fascinating evasion tactic used within this framework. Gatekeepers will frequently build a wall of impossibly strict definitions just to keep a new idea out. Yet, when someone asks them to define the anomalies in their own established theories, suddenly vagueness is totally acceptable. It's a strategic, totally intentional double standard used to keep the gates firmly closed.
Let's move to Section 4, Consequences of Professional Erasure, and see how this builds into systemic fallout.
What actually happens to a scientific field when the power of ignoring becomes its primary defense mechanism? The consequences of this professional erasure are profound. When stability is prioritized over actual innovation, the field shifts from a quest for objective discovery to a regime of paradigm preservation. We get what we can call a Darwinian filter, which brings three major outcomes. First, selective filtration. And yes, to be fair, this does shield institutions from actual noise and unsubstantiated claims, ensuring only compatible ideas get funding. But second, it leads to strategic stagnation. By severely penalizing radical departures, the institution stalls revolutionary breakthroughs. Ideas that would require a total reconfiguration of capital are the ones silenced first. And third, intellectual narrowing. Scholars figure out pretty quickly that their professional survival depends on institutional compliance, not the pursuit of disruptive truths. This creates a closed loop where the citation economy just blindly reinforces existing power structures rather than seeking to overturn them.
So, the crucial point is this. There is a permanent, underlying conflict embedded in the very foundation of the hard sciences. It is the cold tension between the absolute necessity of institutional order, keeping the lights on, the grants flowing, making sure the university functions, and the inherently messy, totally destructive, and revolutionary nature of actual truth.
I want you to really absorb this quote from our source material, because while the architecture of silence undeniably protects the status quo, it also defines the rigid boundaries of what the hard sciences are permitted to know. It dictates not just what is discovered, but what is officially allowed to be remembered.
Which leaves us with a rather haunting thought to wrap up our explainer today. If ignoring really is the ultimate weapon of institutional preservation, we have to ask ourselves, looking back through the vast history of physics and mathematics, how many truly world-changing ideas have already been successfully starved of oxygen? Thanks so much for exploring this with us today. Keep questioning the boundaries of what we know, and we'll see you next time.